my co-host, Mr. Chuck Snow, and tonight, again, we have a special treat for you guys. So nice, we're doing it twice. We bringing them back to back. Um, he did such a wonderful job showing us everything from his from the museum that he has up in up in Minnesota. So we got Bob Nuss that's going to be joining us again tonight. Looking forward. We're going to be talking. Actually, we're going to talk change up subject matter a little bit, and we're going to actually be talking a little bit more about his truck dealerships and his dealership network and things of that nature. So if you guys could do us a huge favor, please like, share, and subscribe to the video. Like, share, and subscribe. It doesn't cost you a thing. It just helps us out, helps us get the video out to a broader audience. And, for the past few weeks, you guys are probably like, man, Rico is just all over the place. He's got a different background every week. Well, I'm coming to you live and in living color from my truck today. So, we by any way, by any means, we're going to try our best to try to bring the show to you as best we can. And with that being said, I'm going to bring in my co-host, Mr. Chuck Snow. Good evening, Chuck. How are you?
We're doing great, Rico. I'm actually broadcasting tonight from my old boardroom, and I can't tell you how comfortable I am to be in the old Traffic's, or it's not old, in my former Traffic's boardroom, which is no longer mine, but it feels good to be here.
Good to be home, as they say.
It is. You know what? I did a lot of shows, as you know, from this boardroom, and made a lot of great deals in this boardroom, and I miss that part of it.
Good deal. Well, like I said, so nice we're having them back twice.
Yes, you know what? I got to tell you, I had so many positive comments about that show we did recently with Bob being so generous and taking us through his truck museum. In spite of our technical difficulties, our listeners just ate that up with good reason. I was in awe as you were. I'm an old truck fanatic, and Macs are real close to my heart. If I ever did get a tattoo, it would be a Mac on my arm, but I'm not getting one. And with no further ado, I think we should bring Bob on so we can find out more about his dealerships.
Absolutely.
Hey, Bob.
Good evening, Bob. How are you?
Good evening.
Thank you,
Rico and Chuck. How are you guys? I tell you what, the last week we were together was my first podcast, and of course you had to walk me through. I didn't know you could change or get an old dog some tricks here, but anyway,
a lot easier.
We had a wonderful time.
As I found out, you can train an old dog a lot easier sometimes than you can a pup.
Well, I'll tell you what, Bob, I want to thank you again for being so generous with your time and coming back on and joining us again. When I said I wanted to have you back on the show, you probably didn't think it was going to be this quickly, but
well, I knew there was a shortage of talent, but I didn't know I was the first. You two guys are running some kind of renegade network here. I didn't know what I was getting into, but we had a good time. I tell you what, going through the museum. In fact, we were over there today. We had 4 of our guys in from a restoration shop, and one of our moving guys. We're moving 2 antique trucks up to a customer's 95th anniversary up at Rogers, Minnesota. A long time customer, Light Construction, and we're taking a couple of trucks, and it's always a joy to see the trucks get polished up and taken out, because they're made to be shown. And the night after, I think we were together last week, and the next night I had a couple from Connecticut and their son. Were down at Mayo Clinic, and they had called about a tour, and then I had time. It was like, can you come in the next 15 minutes? And it was like, we'll be right there. So a lot of fun. It's a little tricky to hold an iPad over your shoulder. It's like shaving in a mirror, but you got a mirror. You're doing it in the mirror behind you.
Us Paul guys, we know all about that one.
Yeah. Right.
So, Bob, you know what? How many trucks, the Nuss Group, how many truck dealerships do you people run altogether?
Well, we have 9 dealerships in a corporate office. A couple of one of our buildings is just a standalone body shop. And then we're in the Volvo construction equipment business. Our headquarters are in Burnsville for that operation. We bought that in 2008. And but we've got we're Mack Trucks in all of our locations, and we're Volvo construction or Volvo trucks in 4 locations in Minneapolis, Mankato, and Duluth and Eau Claire.
I see.
So, but everybody sells that stuff. We're in the leasing business at Minnesota Truck Leasing. We've got a few hundred trucks in there, and so I've been in it for I started in this business back in 1969 full time. I'm working in my dad's dealership in Rockford, Illinois. It was after I got out of college. I worked for a company called
Oh, yeah,
Valspar.
sure.
You probably know who the varnish company
Yep.
paint. They ended up merging with Sherwin-Williams. When I worked for them, they were a $25 million company, and when they finally sold out, I think they were doing a few billion. And it was a series of mergers that they did. And but I decided to get back in the truck business in '69. My dad had asked me about coming back, and I ended up running the parts department for 3 years, back from '69
Now,
to
had you
73.
done that at all as a summer student?
Well, as a kid in school, we had the dealership. It was just a small dealership in Rockford. We were my dad didn't become a dealer until 1959, or just the end of '59. He was a mechanic, and he started right out of 8th grade into a new shop on the west side of Rockford, and they had a Phillips 66 station. They were critical. He was a critical mechanic during World War II, so he never got drafted because he was probably the only mechanic on the west side of Rockford. And one thing led to another, and then he rented an office for a few years to a fellow that was the Mack distributor, and everything was under the factory branches. At one time, Mack had about 65 factory branches, and
Right.
they were all under the Chicago branch. So if you needed parts, you got your parts out of Chicago, or when you became a dealer, then you could mail your orders in, and that's what we did. Was computers. We didn't have microfiche. Everything was old-fashioned.
Mhm. Yep.
And I remember when we were doing our labor rate in the shop was $8 an hour,
What?
and the mechanics were getting like $2.50. Yeah, I can tell you, I used to in high school. I would work. I because I had a good. I wouldn't say I had a good handwriting, but I was good with numbers and everything. And we'd write a repair order up to do an in-frame overhaul, and I'm talking about pulling the heads together on a Mack Thermodyne engine or
Right.
711, and you pull them with the exhaust manifold and intake on it. So that first overhaul, you're just doing piston sleeves, rings, rods, and mains. To this day, I remember all those part numbers.
Wow.
If you had a 1970 Maxidine today, I could give you the part numbers on the piston sleeves, rings, rods, and mains, and gasket set, because we had to know it. And we'd write the ticket up. It was about $1,000 bill to do an in-frame overhaul.
Oh my
And
God.
yeah, we'd get the dry ice, and we'd have to we'd have to put the sleeves in because they're dry ice and everything. And
Right.
and yeah, we did that kind of stuff. And I remember when the truck payments, when my dad was selling trucks, when the first guy that had to make $500 a month truck payment, he said, I don't think these guys will ever make it paying $500 a month for a truck payment. Now today they're paying $2,500, $3,000, $3,500 a month, depending on what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
It's
some people are very successful at it. It's just the numbers have changed. You were making getting out of it. If you made, I remember a business professor asked us one time, what would your goal in life to make for a salary? And in a business class, I think most of the class said, if we ever made $25,000 a year, we'd be so rich.
Yes.
And we'd never. That was big money in 1966. So when you started a job out of college, I had multiple offers. It was $6,000 a year, I think, is what you got for $500 a month. That's about what you were making. $125 a week, and we got by. I mean, everything was relevant. Gas was 25 cents, and so it was just. Rico, he's sitting back. Listen, he's not believing any of this. I see. He said,
no. I believe it. I certainly do believe it. I mean, you guys got me by a few years, but I've seen in my little short lifespan on this earth, I've seen how crazy things have gotten when prices have kind of. Because I remember back when I was in high school, gas was somewhere in the ballpark of like 20 some odd cents a gallon or something like that.
Yeah,
You
down
must
in the
have been
south,
older than you think.
it was pretty cheap. Yeah, it was, 50 years ago, it was pretty damn cheap. I remember up here, you could buy it on the outskirts of Toronto 50 years ago for about 40 cents a gallon Canadian. And our gas was quite often more expensive than yours. Yeah, things have just gone crazy. So tell me something. What happened? Like, what made Mac decide to sell to Volvo? Do you have any idea what happened there?
Well, they didn't decide to sell because at the time, you may remember, Mac used to be publicly traded, and the stock was on the New York Stock Exchange. And you remember the
Yes.
Midliner? The Midliner was built by
yes.
Renault
I
truck
drove one
RVI.
once.
So I chaired the dealer council back in the for 5 years. I had to put term limits in, so they kept reelecting me to do the job. I must have been doing something right, but it's supposed to have been a 1 year term, but it ended up 5 years. But anyway, Renault had, when they were bringing the Midliner over and the Mac dealers were selling Midliners, as part of that, they bought in. They started with about 20% of the company of Mack Trucks when it was
Right.
publicly traded. Well, they eventually it went to 40%, and then Mack got into some financial problems in the 80s. They were bouncing on the wall there for a while and had some product issues. But Renault ended up buying. Um, they put a subscription in to try to take it public. But in order to privatize the company, you have to buy 80% of the stock in order to take the stock off they can disregard the other 20%. People can take it or leave it. I think at one point the stock was, if I recall, it was up at $15 a share or something. It dropped down to about $6 a share. They ended up taking the thing private. I know we had a meeting with the executives of some Renault people that came over and to see what they were going to do. And as dealers, I told them, I said, look at guys, there's 200 plus dealers. I said, between us, we've got over 4,000 employees. We had more employees than Mack Trucks had. We're in the distribution business. And it was very apparent to everybody that our lives, I mean, let's face it, if they'd have gone out of business, all we'd have had would have been the neon in our neon Bulldog, or our Bulldogs. That would have been all we'd have had. But it turns out that they bought the stock and they ran it as part of RVI, and of course that was run by the French government owned about half of that company, so that was not a good deal. And then at one point they decided they were going to buy Volvo trucks, or they wanted to buy Volvo out, and the Volvo board approved it, but the stockholders didn't, and they ended up turning around, and when Renault, I don't know if they defaulted or if they were in default on, I guess it's the same thing, on some notes to the French government. The French spun them off, and Renault came in and Volvo came in and bought Renault RVI. They bought the RVI truck side. They didn't buy the car side. They ended up, with that, they ended up getting Mack. So it wasn't Mack selling out to them.
Now I see.
They picked up what was in the neighborhood, and Mack happened to be sitting there on the bench, and they got picked up on the deal. But Volvo's it's a big company, and they've got a lot of great products.
They got a lot of trucks on the road. They've done, and they've got a lot of construction equipment. You see more and more Volvo construction equipment out there, and you certainly see an awful lot of Volvo trucks. I know for driver comfort overall, drivers love them. That is their, truck for truck. just if you talk to drivers, and every truck has their issue. It doesn't matter what, what make, none of them are perfect. But when you talk about creature comfort and ergonomics, which is big because, these people spend a lot of time in these trucks. That's their workplace and their home. And I would have to say that Volvo rates tops of any truck out there for ergonomics and driver comfort.
Yeah, and I think fuel economy wise and some of the technology they have with electric trucks that they've launched and the hydrogen fuel cell in the future, their plan is to have multiple options, and of course clean diesel, and of course just in the last few days there's been an agreement made with the engine manufacturers and CARB to extend the time on, for a while we weren't even going to see diesel trucks next year in California.
That doesn't work.
So that's no, and if you're in drayage and you're working in the ports and that, you're going to have alternate fuel. You're going to have electric, or I don't know if you can even run CNG.
So by you being kind of plugged in with the whole dealership network and everything like that, it seems as if I've been seeing a little bit more of a shift away from the electrical, people trying to go electrical, and what you just mentioned, the hydrogen, seems like there's more of a push to maybe develop that technology more so than the battery operated technology.
Well, I think they're all going to have some play in it, and maybe the electric truck might be better for the B2B,
I agree.
Stuff that runs 50, 100 miles a day. Because we've got two of our locations certified for Mack and Volvo, and we've sent technicians to school. We've also just purchased. We had one charger. We just gave a purchase order for a charger, a Kempower, which is European approved for Volvo, and it's got 2 lines on it, so it's like a 50-watt fast charger. The other one we had was the one in Roseville, I think, is Helix, Helix, I believe it is, Helix. There's going to be a lot of different chargers on the market, and I don't know, the prices will probably, I hope they come down. But we don't see a lot of people running in to get their hands on an electric truck. Yeah, I do know that they're going to be forced to. I mean, you look at all the car technology, the Teslas, but all the car manufacturers that are building electric trucks right now, I do think there's going to be a price.
100%. You know what? I couldn't agree more. We had a gentleman on one night. Now he is out of California. That's where his head office is, and he leases electric vehicles, cars right up to 18-wheelers. And actually, I don't think there were any 18-wheelers. They were single axle tractors that he was doing full maintenance leases on. And Rico was all excited. I thought he was going to fall off his chair at the numbers made a lot of sense. But then all of a sudden, when it came out that you could only haul 35,000 pounds, Rico lost his excitement very quickly because he realized that with the contracts he has, it just doesn't work. But I know damn well, I've listened to one of the beer companies out of California a few times on 146 on the Trucker Channel, where their fleet manager's been interviewed, and she's having great success with them because they're back every night. They run a local run, or they run from the brewery to the distribution center, which is 300 miles, and boom, the thing is plugged in for the next 12 hours, and it works. But you know what? In transport, it's a little bit different when you're for hire carrier. It's a little bit harder. Unless you're hauling really light stuff, or like what you said, B2B. I think it's great for home delivery. It's great for for your box vans and stuff like that. I think that there's definitely a place for them. But when you're talking about pulling 44,000 pounds up Donor Pass, there's no way. It ain't going to work. So it's back to the drawing board there.
I think on the school bus, now we were in a new school bus that Bluebird built. We were at an event over in Alberta, Minnesota with Recharge
Right.
Minnesota. And they were at a factory that built chargers for like HELOCs. And they took all of the people that participated. We took a couple of Volvo loaders, we took a Volvo loader over there, like a 2-yard bucket, perfect for a government job, working 3-4 hours a day maybe, or didn't do a lot of hard work in a quarry, let's say. So was doing around site work. The loaders would work fine. The school bus is fine because the school bus runs twice a day, 2-3 hours. Could charge all day. And I understand there's 3,000 or 4,000 electric school buses in the country. So that's probably a great opportunity. But like over the road, I don't see it pulling 80,000, and you won't have enough charging stations, and you can't wait. If it doesn't charge, you wouldn't even want to have to fill up every 300 miles. Can you imagine even stopping for 10 minutes because you've got your 34-hour, you can only run so many hours a day, so if you got you stopping twice a day fueling, there's no truck driver I know if stopping twice a day.
The only way that this would work is when and they will do it at some point if they're going to really push these things. We have to figure out the weight allowance, and we may need an extra axle on the tractor. So they're all like Tridem drives, and then have the batteries accessible so that you can bring them into a truck stop, and a guy comes with a lift truck, a tow motor, pulls them out and puts them back in. But that's still going to take, anytime you stop a big truck, is a minimum of a half hour. Even for somebody to go and relieve themselves at a rest area, by the time you get back up to momentum, it's 30 minutes.
I've noticed that. Just you go in a car and you stop in a rest area, and then you get back on and say, geez, it took me a half hour to catch up with the truck that went by, and he's only going 64 mile an hour. 65,
exactly.
But it takes you so long. You're 50 miles down the road before you catch up with him.
Exactly. So, you know what? That's where these things have to improve, or they've got to have allowances. Maybe they allow the drivers to drive longer. I don't know, because they're driving electric trucks. No idea. But we really, if we want this to work, everybody's got to get on side. From the engineers to our lawmakers, everybody's got to work with it to push this thing forward. We can't have we just can't have a few people pushing this forward, or it's never going to work.
One of the issues that we're still faced with in the U.S. is, of course, the federal excise tax, the 12% federal excise tax, which you have your GST tax in Canada, which is
13%. You know what? It's almost the same. Well, in Ontario, it's 13 because it's a harmonized sales tax between the province and the country. So in Ontario, where we live, is 13%.
So that tax in the U.S. goes back to World War I, and I've lobbied in Washington with every one of our state representatives and senators, and even the ones that are from nearby states, to get that tax repealed, because that bars entrance to buying new trucks, and especially when you take a truck now that's almost double the price. So the federal excise tax, I've always thought that the federal excise tax should go away, and maybe the answer is a mileage tax, because the one thing about the federal excise tax on the new trucks, it's hard for a trucker to pass on the price of the truck to a shipper. The shippers don't care if you're running a 10-year-old truck. They just want that load moved from Minneapolis to New York or wherever it's going, or coast to coast. As long as you got a truck that meets DOT and you got insurance, they don't care what you run. There's millions or hundreds of thousands of old trucks that probably, if they got off the road and they were replaced by even newer, like 2017, 2018 trucks with these clean diesels, we could clean up a lot of it.
Yeah. And you know what? I can tell you from my own experience here at, at Trafex, when we would bring in we'd bring in an older diesel truck, that was being worked on in the shop and the mechanic had to run it, you would hear everybody in the office screaming and yelling, shut that thing down, I can't breathe. And they would have the new trucks running in there and you'd never hear a peep from anybody because you know what? They burn clean. They really do. They may not be dependable, and they're not compared to the old stuff, but they're a hell of a lot cleaner. They don't sound the same. They don't run the same. They're different beasts, but damn it, they are clean.
It's funny in the old days with the trucks. I mean, back in the 60s and 70s, you could go in blindfolded to a diesel shop, and you knew when you took a breath of air in the shop, whether you were in a Cummins shop or whether in a Detroit diesel shop or a Mack shop, because the engines, they use the same fuel and the oil, but they smell, I don't know why, but a Mack engine, I always knew when I went into the Chicago branch as a kid. I was in 11th grade. My dad had sent me in to get parts at night, and that big branch down there right next door to Comiskey Park. And I'd take my 52 Ford down there and honk the horn to get in to get parts. I was telling somebody today, and you knew as soon as you got in there, because there's 50 Macks in there being worked on, and you hear the engines running, but there's a distinct smell. And if you went into a Detroit shop, or your eyes would water with a 2-cycle engine or whatever, or if you went to the Caterpillar or Cummins, the Cat, if you went to a Cat dealer, same way, those things. And they all had their own sound too.
Yes. Oh yeah. You could tell from a mile away those screaming Jimmies, and a Mack had a distinct, like you knew that was a Mack engine. It just had a distinct sound.
Yep, it was. And now today they're all quiet. They're clean. And like you said, the reliability issues, because of the technology, the wiring, we're still running these things on 12 volt. I don't know. I think there got to be maybe a BMW's got like a 48 volt, a mild hybrid. But I think that the technology on the wiring, I think, is our biggest. There's just so many sensors.
Yeah, well, that's it.
That have to, whether it's a depth sensor, whether it's a fuel pressure sensor, and things like that. It just there's just a lot of technology wrapped up today. And I know if we get a truck that goes over to a body company and they mount a body on it and they drill a hole in the frame and they go into the main harness, and you got to replace a chassis harness because you can't repair them.
Right.
And you pull that harness, you get somebody unhooking and you lay it out on the floor, and it looks like an anaconda with about 50 tentacles on it at both ends. I mean, truly, that's it. It doesn't matter what truck it is. It doesn't matter if it's Mack or Volvo or.
No, they're all. You know what? They're all. And that's why Caterpillar got. That's why they got into the truck engine business, is they couldn't meet the criteria for with pollution. Which was too bad. They built a damn good engine.
Well, they did, and it's just I think the cost of entry. It's just like some of the engines that if you looked at, for several years we had the 16-liter Volvo, we had it in the Mack and the MP10. The cost to certify that engine was prohibitive to meet compliance for the sheer numbers that you're going to get for a 16-liter application, because it was really only the heavy haulers that wanted that. If you're running 80,000 pounds down the road, you don't need a 16-liter engine, or you don't need 600 horses. And I think you've got to be frugal in that. I think some of the things that I know that Volvo's doing with the turbo compounding, the technology you're running, when you get down to where you're running down the road at 1,000 or less RPM,
right,
you're going to maximize your fuel economy.
Yes, I know that Volvo has taken a lot of their technology and shared it with Mack, of course, and a lot of the people running the new Macks are getting incredible fuel mileage. I have a friend of mine that listens to this show all the time, and running real light on flat surfaces, she's gotten up to 13 miles per gallon. And I have and this is no, Mac isn't paying me to say this, and I will vouch, you didn't pay me to say this, but she had an incident. She bought a new Mac, and she took delivery of it when Rico and I were, I think, we were at a seminar together from Kevin Rutherford's CMC conferences, and that's when she got delivery of this brand new Mac, and it never ran right. It ran. It was chewing up rear end tires on one side, especially, and they took it back to the dealers and a whole bunch of, and they couldn't make sense of it, and they finally figured out what the issue was. The frame had been twisted during transport to the dealer. It was on a stacked, where they have 3 or 4, they're stacked up, and it was put, I guess, on an angle. Frame got twisted. Mac gave her a brand new truck to replace it, and I got to tell you that when I heard that, I've never heard of that in my life.
Well, I've seen that,
and
and that can happen. Yeah, both of them. We've had a couple deals like that, and that's probably the easiest way, because I'll tell you, when you start tweaking the frames in a new truck and you try to twist them back to what happened, like you said, you get in a deck set. We've had if a driver gets the drive unit, let's say, down in the ditch, and then it gets pulled back up, and the frame on the second or third truck has got the weight of another truck on the back of it, and it gets twisted. You can get a dip in it, and boy, it's a real problem. It'll be chewing tires up for sure.
You know what? That's great to hear that it is done with Mac, because I don't think there's any other OEM cars or trucks that does that. I remember taking delivery of a brand new 1986 Jaguar Sovereign, which was an amazing car. It was one of the best vehicles I've ever owned. I put 420,000 miles on it, okay? And the dealer that sold it to me could not believe that this car lasted that long. And none of the stuff that goes with Jaguars went on that car. And but I went to another dealer for service. I had some minor issues, and somebody said, well, go to this dealer. And I'll never forget, I was standing there, and this gentleman, who I thought was elderly at the time, because I was like 34 years old, but he was probably in his 60s, which is a hell of a lot younger than I am today. Anyways, he blew up at the dealer. He said, every mile I put on this car is between this dealership and my home. This is the worst car I've ever had. This is a lemon. And the guy left, and I looked at the dealer who actually owned the dealership, and I said, why don't you put that guy another car? I said, he's an older guy. I'm sure he seems to be a wealthy guy. I'm sure he's got a bunch of wealthy friends, and you're not getting a lot of good press about Jaguars. Why wouldn't you just give him a new car? And they looked at me like I had 3 heads. When I heard this about Mac replacing the truck, it really let me know that this, what, my love for Mac trucks is for a reason.
Well, they'll all do it. I mean, if they have to, and there's cases where you get, whether it's a frame deal is a big deal. That's worse than having an engine, I think, because a lot of times you might get you could have anybody's truck, and 10,000 miles, a rod could go on the block. You never know what could happen. When that happens, you're putting a whole new engine in. The problem is you got today is with the allocation of parts and the shortages of stuff, it takes a while to get replacement parts. Doesn't matter what you're driving. So you might have to put somebody in a rental truck, because that guy, whether it's a Rico or somebody like Rico that's got a load and a commitment every week, he's got to have a truck. And so we got rental trucks for it, because that's it's a balancing act to try to keep everybody on the road. It's somebody that's got a ready-mix plant and they've got 20 trucks, and they've always got a couple of the spare ones down there. They can get by, they can park one to get service on it. But somebody that's running over the road, and some of these over the road trucks, you get two people in the two drivers in there, a couple or two guys or gals or whatever, they can put 300,000 miles a year on these trucks.
Oh, they do. Yeah.
And it's,
3 years, 3 years of that truck has had, it's toast. It's got 900,000 hard miles. My understanding is those things are in worse shape when you look at them than your 20-year-old dump truck that's been going into the pits every day.
yeah,
Because
that's
those things don't stop.
that's the problem with those trucks that run hard like that, is they don't get the maintenance that they should have. They get a quickie oil change type thing, but the little things that you got to look at, we see things on trucks that people miss. They'll take a truck into a independent shop and get it serviced, and then they'll change oil, but they won't grease the kingpins.
Right.
So, and we see this on medium duty trucks. I had a truck that was a year old and the kingpins were out. Well, we brought the truck in and we put a jack under the front axle and the pins were frozen. Nobody had ever greased the pins. And when you grease the kingpins on a truck, you got to put a jack under the Elliott beam, under the beam, and you have to grease it and then turn the steering wheel back and forth so that you're taking the weight off the beam and allowing the grease to get around the bushings, right, top and bottom. And I'll bet you we see every few months somebody comes in with a medium duty truck, or they come in with even an over the road truck. I had a guy and he said, well, that's under warranty. I said, frozen kingpins are not under warranty. This is just like, right.
And you know what? And I guarantee you those quick lube shops at the truck stops are not jacking trucks up to grease the kingpins properly. There's no way.
No, they aren't. They don't have they're running through, they're dropping the oil, they're putting the pan, they're putting the filter on, spinning it back on, and and shoot the guy out the door. And yeah, you got a good deal, you got in and out in an hour, but if you don't get the things greased properly, I think the greasing is probably as much important, if not more, than just changing oil. Well, you can run long on an oil change, but you don't want to run long on a grease job.
I know that and I don't know what your view is, but I know that the big leasing companies like the Penske's and Riders now have really, really extended their oil change frequency. They're like 30, 40,000 miles in between oil changes because they're using synthetics. And obviously, the one thing about these companies is they're very number centric. They're watching bottom line and they know what they're doing. And if they can put in really good synthetic oil and save on labor and oil, they're going to do it. And it looks good on their environmental scorecard as well.
Right. Well, they run, everything's running synthetic now. And if your oil change intervals are based on your fuel economy, if you're getting, if you're only getting 5 miles a gallon, you better be changing your oil more frequently because you're going to get some fuel dilution in your oil. And if you're getting 8 or 9 miles, 7, 8, 9 miles per gallon, which should be a good fleet average, that's a lot different than the people that are getting 12 and 13. The people that are getting the 12 and 13 are running their engines very low RPM, 1,000 RPM.
Yes.
You get less, and your engines are going to live longer because your piston foot travel per mile is less at 1,000 RPM than it is at 1,900. And that's how we got, in the whole industry, we got the mileage down to where it's so much better. And the other thing is, like the Volvo iTorque or the M-Drive with the low gears, so they give you, for startability, you've got an overdrive transmission, but you're running, you got a transmission where you can just idle at 900, 900, and you can come out of a pit somewhere and you're not revving the engine up because you got a transmission that's 20-to-1 first gear.
Yeah.
And so you get the startability. And there's a couple guys I know that with the turbo compounding, Volvo's got a driver that's Joel Morrow. I don't know if you've ever followed him he's on LinkedIn and Facebook, and he's constantly posting for his daily mileages and his fuel consumption, but he'll run furniture and they'll run different road speeds to test to get the maximize your fuel economy. I think if everybody would some of it's the road speed obviously has a lot to do with it. If you're going to have your foot to the floor and running 75 mile an hour all day long, don't be thinking you're going to get any good fuel economy, because you're not.
You don't. You know what? Anybody that's driven a truck and has driven a truck at 75 or 80 miles an hour knows that, number one, you're hard on yourself and you're hard on your fuel, and you don't get there that much quicker. That's the fallacy of it all. To save that 20 minutes or so, you beat the living heck out of yourself and your truck. And how much did it cost you in extra fuel as compared to running? And some trucks do really well at 55 miles an hour. I remember there was a guy, Kevin Rutherford. I'm going to use him again because he had these wonderful seminars, these CMC conferences, and he would have, there'd be a lot of lectures about fuel economy because it was so important. And there was one guy there that had a big, long Peterbilt, and you know what? He was getting lousy fuel mileage. And they said, well, if you want to keep the truck the way it's geared, the only way you can keep that truck and do what you're going to do is drive 55 miles an hour. And you know what? The guy liked this truck so much that he slowed it down to 55 miles an hour. And lo and behold, he got decent fuel mileage. It made a huge difference. He went from 5 to 7.
Yeah, it's a good point. And it's the other thing is idling these trucks. You can't idle them all. You just can't. It's too hard on them. They use fuel in the winter time. Of course, the valves can ice. You get more maintenance issues by pumping a bunch of hours on something that's not going anywhere. And if you could,
you know what,
diligently,
the new trucks. I found out the hard way. We bought 10 new Volvos about 10 years ago, and we had them based out of Alberta. Now, I was not familiar with any of the new technology. I actually shunned it, to be honest, because I just knew how, especially at that time, they were problematic. But the problems that we had with those trucks were all because of idling. Other than that, the trucks actually did very well, but they had all sorts of issues. And when we did a deep dive, we realized that those issues were all caused because we didn't put in any sort of a unit for the driver's comfort and to keep the drivers warm or cool. We let them idle. And there was a huge mistake. We should have put in some sort of a system because it's cold there. It's 40 below. We should have put in one of the systems. You have the same weather in Minnesota. It does get 40 below there because I've been through Minnesota driving a truck when it was 40 below many years ago. And
Rico, we'll have to bring Rico up here and take him ice fishing. I think he went and had dinner while we were sitting here talking. He went over and got a hamburger.
I'm running out of daylight over here. I don't have much light on my end. The sun is getting ready to go down on us.
Yeah, he's the same time as I am, so it's after. Yeah.
Are you in your 34-hour? Are you in your restart, Rico, or are you just taking a break tonight?
No, I'm actually here at a customer waiting to make a delivery. Actually, but they're not ready for me quite yet, so we're just waiting on them to give us a call.
I think that's what I hear more from drivers is the waiting time, the demurrage, I guess you'd call it, like in a railroad or whatever. You got your truck tied up, you got your load there, and the guys can't get you in for 2 hours. You get there, you bust your rear end to get there early so you can make the delivery at 8 in the morning, and they're not ready for you till 10. And then you got 20 drops on the trailer because, the more drops you have, the more money you can make, and if you're willing to do that. But that's the frustrating thing. With all the technology with the computers and text, you would think you could notify somebody, hey, I'm 30 minutes away. Are you going to be ready for me? What door do I have to go to get unloaded? And there's 2 pallets or whatever.
Well, you know what? You're right. You're right on the money there. And one of the issues that we're having in the industry is attracting young people. And then once we bring them in, getting them to stay. You know what? And stuff happens, unfortunately, and the old timers, it's water off a duck's back. But these younger people are not used to being told no. And when they get to a plant, when they get to a plant to make a delivery or pickup and they're told they're not going to get loaded, and the driver has a date on Friday night and he goes, well, I got to be home for 7 o'clock because I got tickets to a concert or whatever. And the shipper goes, well, that ain't happening. That driver quits. And you know what? A lot of times, the perfectly good candidate that could be filling a much badly needed position just says, you know what, the hell with it. I'm going to work on construction. I'm going to do something else because I can't do this. So, you know what? I don't think we're helping by behaving like that. For the shippers and receivers, even the truck stops. Sometimes the lineups at truck stops for a driver just to purchase fuel. It's insane.
Yeah,
You see it all over, and it's a
I've
real
seen it.
problem. And if we're going to get in front of this driver shortage and bring in young people and keep them, because retention is a lot cheaper than recruitment.
Well, it's attracting drivers and diesel technicians. We have the same issues, and I'm on the board, the foundation board for the Minnesota Trucking Association, and we've got a campaign, Drive Minnesota, to recruit more young people into our industry, whether it's even introducing high
Oh
school
yeah,
kids to the industry.
100%.
Because in the museum, we've had the driver Riverland Driver Technical School. It's a Riverland College. Every year they bring over the driving class, and they're not a 2-year program. It's a 10-week or whatever
Right.
program. What I see is a lot of late 20s, early 30s people doing a career
Yep.
change. I tell them all, you look at the history of trucking, but I got to tell you, there's not another industry that you can get in and come out. And once you become a good driver and you follow the rules and you get productive and you don't you maintain accident free and drug free and everything, it's a very rewarding
Oh
career.
my God, yeah. And people are, you're right. But people have become aware of that part. I spent the weekend, 2 weekends ago in Atlanta, Georgia, at a conference, and I worked at a trade show for an advocacy group called Next Gen in Trucking, and it's to bring in young people. And this was for teachers and guidance counselors. And I have to tell you that our booth was probably the hottest booth in the entire building. Teachers were coming up going, I heard how much money truck drivers can make. And I said, well, not only can they make this money, but they can do this without having any student debt. By the time you take a high school student, and the best way, whether they go into as a technician or a truck driver, or doing a multitude of things, being a salesman or salesperson for freight, all these things are great ways of being able to look after yourself, and you don't need to have $250,000 in student debt to pay off when you graduate. And that was the buzzword around this conference. I couldn't believe how many teachers said, I've thought of not teaching anymore and driving a truck.
Well, we've done this a few years ago. It was the first time we participated in a job fair with 1,700 sophomores and junior high school students. There was some seniors there too, but there was a lot of factories there. But we, at our dealership group, I came up with the idea. We had a big screen TV. We had a nice door prize for some Lego Mack trucks. Kids all like Legos, whether they're boys or girls. They still like Legos. They're fun to build, especially if you get a complicated model to build. But anyway, I talked to Volvo Action Service, and I've got them to we put a live feed into our booth, and we had the guys at the Volvo Action Service at Greensboro on the phone, and I said, I want you guys to map where we're at in Minnesota and show every truck that's potentially broke down with, like say, it's a low voltage problem, a noise in the engine or something like that. And the kids could see live on TV the trucks it was like watching airplanes in the air,
yeah.
But you're watching trucks within the map of Minnesota and Wisconsin. And they were absolutely fascinated. And we had the kids just like you and I on a podcast. And the kids were asking questions of the people, the technicians at the Volvo Action Service about what do they do and do they guide the truck into a dealership? And they were guiding the truck into our Roseville dealership that had an alternator, was a low voltage issue. So they figured it was either a belt tensioner or alternator going out or something. But if we can show these kids the technology and show them that they can have fun and they can make good money, and they're not going to, like you said, and you're not going to end up with a couple $100,000 in student debt. We have an excess supply of 4-year degree students who are working at Starbucks. Yep. Nothing wrong with Starbucks, their coffee's good, but they don't need a 4-year degree to be doing that, and they don't need a 4-year degree to get in either a diesel technician position or a truck driving position.
Oh yeah.
I got a question for you, Bob.
Yep. Rico,
how has the with the supply chain issues and everything, how has that affected you and your dealership, and also the availability of parts when people have trucks break down and needing parts and things of that nature? How has all of that stuff been how much of an effect has that been, have you seen throughout your dealerships?
That's been a real challenge, and with the, we're on allocations, so that means that most of the parts that we see or that are coming down the pipeline are going to the manufacturing segment. And I've got every location we have has got some trucks sitting waiting for parts, and a lot of times it's just a new truck we're getting ready, but we've got a issue, we've got a fault code, or we've got it's not big stuff. It's not like engines and turbos and rear ends and transmit. It's not that. It's little stuff. And the little stuff will keep you from running. If it's a depth sensor, if it's a filter, or some reason their depth pump or something's not working correctly, you're out of business. And it has affected the pipeline. And you'd like to plan ahead, and we've ordered more parts. We stock more parts. We've got a live feed. My son, Brad, back when he was in college, figured out a way to put a live feed where customers can go into our parts department and get a login for parts and, look up parts. So you get a login. And if you have, let's say you got a brake drum and you can only read, you can see 20 numbers, but you can only see 3, 4, 5 in the middle. Right. So he built a wildcard system that will sequence to our entire parts inventory, and you put the word brake drum with the numbers 3, 4, 5, and it'll give you the rest of the numbers. Wow. He designed that. My son did that when he was in college. In fact, we were live on the internet, I think the same night Al Gore invented the internet. The first night on the internet, believe it or not, we sold a clutch cable for an Isuzu truck in Puerto Rico.
Wow.
And somebody went live and they looked up that we had parts, and they went online and we had the part, and we shipped to San Juan, and the guy, in fact, my night parts guy was there. He said, "You're not going to believe it. We just went live. I just sold a clutch cable in Puerto Rico."
Wow.
He said, "You got to be kidding me." And the guy was sending his credit card through on an email. I said, "Well, tell the guy don't ever do that again. Give him the fax number. You can fax that stuff in, but don't put it on the internet." But he got his part, and but a lot of fleets, we actually, my son showed Mac and Volvo how to go into a dealer's buyer through our firewall and allow them the protocol to get in to see how they could check our inventory. Right. They know what they were selling us, but they didn't know what you sold today or yesterday. They might know what you filed warranty claims on, but you got a lot of other parts that you're selling every day. So we had a lot of major fleets that would go into our parts at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, and it would update every 30 minutes, and it would show every store, all of our locations. It would give, sometimes you've got the part number you're looking for, like a set of fan belts, or what water pump your truck takes, or wheel bearings. You got the part right there, so you can look it up. And we sold a lot of stuff. We sell a lot of stuff online. Now everybody else is kind of doing that, but we were leading on that. In fact, when we first went on the internet, my son, we recorded a Mac engine starting up, and we took an ignition. We started the engine. You hear it was a key. There was a key in the middle of the screen, and you clicked on this key, and you heard our engine start up, and then the air horn. We hit the air horns, and so that was a quick intro to our website back 20 some years ago.
That is so cool.
Yeah, that's what that Brad did. My son Brad did that. Greg's involved. He's more involved. He's our chief operating officer, and also involved with our on the parts and service side, because he was a parts manager, and both of them have been through the American Truck Dealer Academy, so they could learn the intricacies of our industry, which is probably a better 1-year school than going 4 years to a college where you're getting industry specific training. So now dealers are trying to send their key young managers or their future generations to like the Dealer Academy to get the best ideas of the very best of the best people that do the training. So, but there's a challenge, Rico. I'll tell you, the parts thing is I don't remember seeing it quite. It's just. It might be something different every week, and I know that Mac and Volvo have spent money on suppliers. They actually have people remotely working in with suppliers, whether it's your steering wheel supplier, whether it's your tie rod supplier, your hood supplier. You can have all of a sudden, if a factory burns down. I mean, I think I heard that one of our other competitors, their hood factory had a fire and they suddenly couldn't get any hoods. Well, when you got just-in-time inventory, you're building 100 trucks a day. Let's use that as an example. If all of a sudden you can't get hoods, you don't have a 3-4 day supply at the factory. Everything is just in time, and it's line set. Whether it's an auto factory, I mean, here we read the other day where Ford couldn't get door locks, or they couldn't get keys or whatever. They had to quit building pickups because was it Ford or GM? One of them couldn't. You run out of parts, so you can only park so many trucks out in the lot.
Well, I'm looking at the time, and before I fade off into the abyss, we kind of burned through the whole hour there. So Bob, before we get out of here, though, Bob, why don't you tell the listeners and everybody that's out there how about your dealerships, where they can find them, where they can find you, and maybe somebody might be in the market for a Volvo or a Mack truck.
There you go. Well, thank you for the time today, and I really appreciate joining you guys. It's always good to, even though we've only done.
We're going to have you back again because you've got so much information for our listeners. It's wonderful. It really is.
Well, thank you. And we started, I'm in Rochester, Minnesota, and that's where our museum is, the Nuss Collection, which is that's a 501c3. It's a private foundation, but we hold an open house every year, and our open house this year is going to be September 23rd on a Saturday. We'll have a tour. I think we got 3 food trucks, so we'll take care of the food. But because we have a lot of customers that come down there, a lot of people will bring their old trucks and join us, and there's 35 or 40 trucks there of our own. And we've got, like I said last week, we've got a restoration shop up in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And I think there's 20 trucks in the waiting line, and they're not all going to get restored. Some of them are beyond restoration, or some of them might be just parts trucks. But our dealerships, our home office is in Rochester. Our big store is in Roseville, Minnesota, which used to be, at one point, that was the St. Paul Mack branch. Our Burnsville Center, which is on the south side of the Twin Cities, is our Volvo construction location. So in Rochester, we started I started down here in 73, made a handshake deal with the guy. When I took the job to run it, I said, I want to buy this dealership, and I'll make you a challenge that if I grow it bigger than your dealership in Wisconsin, would you sell it to me? And he said, I'll take you up on that. And we shook on it. And in 1978, I went to them, and we were way bigger than their place. And we got the thing done at the end of 79. Right. Let's put it that way. In 83, we're in Mankato, Minnesota. We started a branch over there with 5 guys that all came out of bankrupt trucking companies. We've added onto that building probably 4 times, and remodeled it. And then the next year we went to Eau Claire, Wisconsin. The Mac dealer up there wanted to retire, and he called me and he said, "I'd like to sell, and I want you to be the successor because I don't have anybody else that can do this." And we quadrupled the business the first year. A few years later, we bought 25. We did a tax deferred swap and bought 25 acres out on I-94, and so we've got. That's the fastest growing operation we have. And then we went to Duluth, Minnesota in 91. We have a new store, fairly new store up there. That it's interesting. That building has got because it's built on a hillside, it was an existing building. We remodeled it, we put a heated floor in, and we put a vertical parts retrieval system in there, which is made in Germany. If you've ever seen it, where the offices and sales are on the upstairs and the service is on the lower level. So that's unique. And then we went to St. Cloud in 97. We have a new store we put in St. Cloud in 2008. And then the next day we bought out the Volvo construction dealer in Burnsville, or in Minnesota. And then a year ago, we built a new store in Monticello, Minnesota, and right on 94 and 10 acres. You know, it's getting expensive to build these places now. But Rochester building was behind the truck stop in when I got up there in 73, and the truck stop burnt down January 21st of 1977, and it took most of our shop down, and we had to start over. They had a shop fire in a grease fire or something in the restaurant. I don't know what happened. The owners of the building rebuilt it, and it burnt down again on December 17th of 79. That was the day we incorporated, and I was buying the business. And so we ended up with the property. The truck stop was long gone, but you know, we've had a good run, and we've had we do a lot of business. We got a lot of companies, bodybuilders like McNeilis that builds ready. You know, they started building ready mix trucks years ago. Then he got into building garbage trucks, and that's all they're doing now. It's part of Oshkosh, but we've sold them thousands of trucks over the last 48 years, and so we work with concrete pump companies. We work with fleets around the country, and we've got our own trainer. We've got a high number of master technicians. Our goal is to get everybody up to master technician level so we can give the best service. And so our goal, you know, we love the business. I grew up in it. I'm 78 years old. You know, my friends that are retired, they go down and have coffee. I don't golf that well. I mean, even if it's hard on you to golf. You know, I don't get frustrated at work as much as I get frustrated.
I always said the worst day of work is better than the best day of golf.
Yeah. Well, I got one eagle. I got a buddy, my golf buddy was with me out in California, and I had a par 5, and I had 3 shots, and I put her in the cup from about 130 yards out. And that was the toughest hole. And I tell that story. I said it was just like a hole in one. But Rico, you probably don't even own a golf club.
Oh
you
yeah,
like?
I've got a few. I don't get out and play as much as I probably should. But you know, I need to kind of get back out there and go to the driving range, learn how to hit some a little bit.
Well, one thing I was getting at, our email address is nussgrp.com, short for nussgroup.com, and I'm on Facebook, and I don't add a lot of friends on Facebook, but I do have a lot of followers on LinkedIn, and I do try to push when I see the factory putting new information, whether it's Mac or Volvo construction, or if it's industry related, safety things that people ought to know, I pass it along. And we, you know, we're an essential industry together, and we're only really as strong as our weakest link. If we've got a bunch of drivers who are giving the industry a bad name, or if they're, I just cringe when I see these accidents, you know, where you see 50 or 100 cars, because back in the 60s, I never saw anything. And we had bad weather back then, and people slowed down.
And we didn't have time. We didn't have good winter tires.
The distracted driving is
people have gotten crazy.
Well, I think cruise control is probably, we never had cruise.
I still don't use it.
The
only time I've ever used cruise control in my life was driving a truck through Michigan because I always used to get tickets in the big truck. So I would use it there because it was 55. But other than that, I'm a control freak. I wouldn't even own power windows in my car if it didn't come with it.
Yeah. Well, when you get these cars, like my car's got that adaptive braking deal, and you can say, okay, I'm coming up behind some cars at a stoplight. This car will stop. It scares the hell out of me. It'll do it, but I'm not going to take a chance on that thing. I'm watching what I'm driving a half mile or a quarter mile up the road, and I think these people that I see the accidents and the frequency and the numbers of cars and if you're in the fog, you better get off the road. If you're on ice, you better slow down.
Same as rain, slow down. It's real easy.
Absolutely. Well, Bob, once again, like I say, I appreciate you being so generous with your time. We'll get ready to wrap it up here, and we're going to definitely try to get you back on again because we want to see more of that museum as well. I think we got to see a good bit of it, but I think you still had a couple more up your sleeve up there.
Well, the other thing, if you go into our museum, we've got it's called Trucking Tributes, where we're asking old timers to talk about their family histories in trucking. And we had our marketing gal, Melissa, was at the Macungie Truck Show at the Antique Truck Club of America. She recorded over 50 people who came in and talked about their family history in trucking, and we're posting them on our Nuss collection website. You're going to be able to go in, you give us the approval to put your link on there, and you can see it. But you can see some of the things that other people have done. So if you do come to our open house, I know she'll be doing that again.
Well, I look forward to it. I'm going to see what I'm doing that weekend, and you may see me in Minnesota. It sounds like
I was sitting here thinking the same thing. It's close to my birthday time. Well, it's a little after my birthday, but
well, it's always great to visit with you. And Chuck, when we met back on June 9th at the the American Truck Historical Society, we were busy with Stu McKay and a couple other guys there. We just got to talking, and Stu and I go back a long ways. And you're in the business, you get to know everybody.
And what a small world. You know what? You go to church with one of my fishing buddies.
Yeah,
a small world. That's what trucking's all about.
He was ushering the other day in church, and I said something to him. I ran into a buddy of yours up from Canada. He looked at me with a strange look, and I said, "Now, you know what? You ask a couple questions. You got a link. My wife will do that, and you've got a connection to everybody if you ask enough questions. You either your family, or who you work for, or where you went to school, or it's just it's a small world." Absolutely. But keep it between the ditches and keep it slowed down.
Well, Chuck, let them know how they can. They can't get a
listen, when you're listening, ladies and gentlemen, when you're listening to this, I will probably be out of the continent because I'm heading out. This show is being pre-recorded, but please send me an email. I will get to it when I get to emails, as I do. I don't know what the email reception is going to be where I am, but it's chucksnow280@outlook.com. Put your phone number on there, and I will try to get back to anybody and everybody like I always do. And if I can help any of our listeners with anything, feel free, because it's my mantra to give back, and that's what I do. Just like my friend Bob Nuss here. He wrote the book on giving back. And thank you so much for joining us tonight, Bob. And Rico, let's just put her back in a hole for another week.
Yes, sir. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we thank you guys for taking the time out to join us. You could have been anywhere else in the world, but you took a little time to hang out with us, and we are always eternally grateful for you doing so. For Chuck Snow, my co-host, we want to thank Bob again for coming back and joining us again. We're going to have him back on again, but we definitely want to thank him for being so gracious with his time and coming on and sharing some much needed information with us. So until the next time, ladies and gentlemen, we want you guys to stay safe out there, stay healthy, keep it in between the mustard and the mayonnaise, and we'll talk at you same time, same place next week, God willing. God bless you and good night.
Catch on the flip-flop. God bless. Good night.
Thanks, guys.
Good night.